My name is Dr. Julie Frisbovi, and I'll be moderating our panel this afternoon. I'm very pleased and honored to be here today, along with our esteemed panel. As you could tell by the title of this session, Intuition No Longer Works, Are Today's Governments Well Informed? I think it's a very, very timely topic. If you were at the opening session, I wrote this down. We heard the opening speaker say, "He who owns the data owns the future." I thought that was an extremely timely comment given the topic of our session. So this session will talk about data-driven decision-making and policy-making, both in the government and in the private sector. It'll talk about, each of our panelists will talk about how they use big data combined with data analytics and other tools that allow them to anticipate and respond to complex issues in their countries. Their goal is to create a data-driven culture to support and enhance the governance services they provide. However, as you know, many gaps remain. We have many digital divides. There are issues with data accessibility, quality, reliability, and security that we will also explore. So this session will investigate how forward leaders in both government and business are using data in their respective roles. And we will start, first off, with our dignitary from Malta. Sir, you have launched your government's vision for its future of research and innovation through a new national strategic research and innovation plan. How do you see the role of government in sustaining and nurturing a strong ecosystem of research and innovation?
First of all, good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation and congratulate them for their excellent organization of this summit. Well, the government is a primary actor in strengthening the present capabilities of the country's research and innovation ecosystem. It is also a strategic aid in enabling and valorizing in economic terms and as well in social well-being. Having a top-down perspective, it is also serves as a strategic aid in laying the path for inventors, entrepreneurs, researchers to collaborate and flourish. Moreover, from a more operational sense, the governments have several other tools, including supply tools such as grants, and demand tools, including innovative procurement. Needless to say, it is very important to have all the stakeholders on board, and that is why the Maltese government gives a lot of importance. We call it the quadruple helix, which is the government itself, private industry, academia, and civil society, so that the whole of society can benefit from the research and innovation ecosystem.
Thank you. Ms. Vidal, a similar question. How do you use data in your role as the Minister of Investment, Entrepreneurship, and Industry?
Good afternoon, Julie. Good afternoon to everyone. A special welcome to my colleagues that are present in the room this afternoon. The ministry that I serve is one that oversees a number of smaller government agencies, and these agencies are set up to provide services to members of the public, to businesses and the public in general. And what, in my role as minister, and backed, of course, by the Cabinet of Ministers and the President, we have embarked on a mission to ensure that decisions that are taken, policies that are worked on, policies that are implemented are evidence-based, meaning within all of the agencies that we have, we are establishing a mechanism to collect information, to collect data that will be used to inform the decision-making process of government. we have noticed over the years that decisions have been taken from a top-down approach. Unfortunately, this has not worked efficiently for Seychelles as a country. So we have now changed strategy and will be using a bottom-up approach, meaning collecting information, analyzing and making use of this information, and formulating policy decisions and other related decisions based on the information that we collect. And in doing so, we will be able to better serve the public.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reinfeldt, the next question is for you. Which would you identify as the 3 most important tools to ensure a good level of information for the government to use?
Well, thank you very much. And as my esteemed colleagues, I want to thank you for the kind invitation on this very important question. And to state the obvious, every government around the world wants to do good. Everyone wants to succeed in increasing the quality of life for people. So, but the problem is that we do not always actually deliver on what we like to see. And I think one of the main questions is that we are ill-informed, or we do not actually use information that is at hand. So, as you said, 3 things. Well, first of all, since we have all this data, it's very important to make it transparent. With transparency in e-government times, you can see all the figures you need, but it also is shown to everyone else. So there might be a discussion, is this actually accurate? Are this information that you have on these platforms, do people agree with this? So transparency is good for the government, but it also creates an atmosphere of actual criticism. This is not correct, this is not the actual figures that you should follow. The second thing I've learned to be very important is that you have some kind of independent audit when it comes into all this information. Because the government tends to say, we want success. And the people doing the reforms tend to say, well, we are paid to make this success. It needs to be someone asking the question, do we get value for money? And that should be independent from the government and from the constructors or whoever are doing the work. And there are international standards where you actually are taught how to follow a real good audit. And the question they should ask is exactly this. Do we do what we have told that we should do? Do we get the value for money? And my last point in these 3, and that comes to leadership. I've seen all through my years in politics the need to go there myself. If I've actually taken a decision, if I've been part of a decision process, I also need to be there, on the ground, present in different parts of the country, in different kinds of processes, asking with my eyes, my ears, is this what we wanted? Is this actually happening the way we wanted it? Otherwise, you will be reading papers that might not tell you the truth, but you haven't been there, you actually don't know. So that would be my 3 advices on how to handle this.
Thank you very much. And finally, our last question for Mr. Garodia. You, unlike our other esteemed panelists, are in the private sector rather than in government. Could you just tell us a little bit about how Visa Government Solutions works with governments, such as our esteemed panelists?
The way we partner with governments is usually on the digitization agenda, which we think is a very, very important tool for future growth. And the way we partner with the governments, and we do it pretty much in every corner of the world, is through digital payments. We think digital payments can help unlock and achieve a lot of objectives governments have, be it economic growth, be it financial inclusion, be it access, be it small businesses, and a number of other objectives which come with it. In terms of how we work with the governments, we usually focus on 4 or 5 areas. One is we work with a number of governments in making social payments and disbursements more effective and quick and timely and efficient. It really mattered a lot during times of pandemic when people could not go out, so digital payments were possibly the only way to do things. We work with governments on making procurement more efficient and more transparent, and also giving small businesses access to public procurement. That's a big area where we partner with. The third one is the government-citizen interface and experience. And we think building new digital platforms to enhance the consumer experience, which a lot of the panelists here have achieved. We work a lot with the governments on accepting digital payments, which is a big part of the citizen experience with the government. The fourth one is small businesses, which we think digital payments are a very important tool to help small businesses grow. Otherwise, they'll be left behind. That's one area where we work very actively with governments around on. We have a big initiative, for example, in Poland called Cashless Poland, on how do you reduce the informal sector, how do you grow the small businesses. And the last one is more pertinent to today's topic, which is around data. When you bring digital payments into the economy, apart from it making a lot of things better, it also generates a lot of useful information in terms of spend data, in terms of mobility, and used properly with proper anonymizing it, aggregating it, and taking care with. We put a lot of emphasis on data values, on how we use the data. So nothing happens till we go through all of that rigor. And then we find some very interesting use cases which can help governments do policies better and drive certain areas like tourism, for example, which I'll talk about later, where we worked in Seychelles, actually, with my fellow panelists, in helping grow tourism there. So we can talk more about that.
Okay, thank you very much. And now back to Mr. Azzopardi Tante. Again, we all agree that the global economy is facing tough challenges, and we've heard a lot about that today in the various sessions. What role do you see for research and innovation to ensure that our economies can turn around these challenges and make them into opportunities?
Well, every country seeks to capitalize and synergize on its comparative advantage, be it natural resources, size, demographics, niche in the global market, etc., so that it can prioritize and it can specialize. And this is the case of what we did in Malta. We have the Malta Smart Specialization Strategy, which through a process called entrepreneurship discovery process, we have identified 6 priority areas, 6 thematic areas, being health and well-being, marine technology, aviation and aerospace, smart manufacturing, and future digital technologies. And through these, we have focused further in areas such as gene therapy, automation, drone technologies, etc., etc.
And how did you identify those areas?
Through the process, which I explained before, it's the entrepreneurship discovery process, and from earlier question, through the quadruple helix, being the government, the private industry, civil society, and academia as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Vidot, what are the challenges that you face relative to acquiring and using data in your country?
I would have to say that having such a small economy, over the years, Seychelles has not been, and governments and institutions for that matter, have not been the best at collecting and maintaining data. And the administration that I work for is new in office, so I'm currently serving the second year, moving on to the 3rd year in office now. This is something that we have had to put a lot of emphasis on. Because we are a small country, sometimes it's been very easy for each institution or agency to focus on their own respective mandate. And the interaction and the collaboration and coordination between agencies have not been to the level that it should have been. And therefore, in implementing the new approach to decision-making, policy-making, we have embarked on placing considerable effort in relooking at the way the agencies function and implementing and introducing intelligence units to essentially collect information. We do have a designated Bureau of Statistics, which serves as the agency which oversees and collects statistics on behalf of the Seychelles government. That's the National Bureau of Statistics. But we do have to strengthen, and we do need to invest a lot more resources in making sure that the Bureau really serves its purpose. And of course, this is not something that countries can just have materialized overnight. So it's got to be a process. There's also a change in mindset, which we have to work on with the employees and make sure that they understand the value of collecting information, the value of data. Data is considered in the modern day world now almost it's as valuable as gold. And this is a concept which we have to keep putting across with to our employees.
It sounds like quite an effort that you're making. On to Mr. Reinfeldt. What are some of the risks that could occur when a government gets it wrong relative to identifying appropriate data? Are there biases that you need to look for that are important in the work that you do?
Well, I identified three very important obstacles that always stands in the way of success for a government reform. And the first, and this is very widely referred to globally, is to say bureaucracy. And in a sense, when we say bureaucracy, we think we have slow and sleepy employees in the state. I think that's making it too easy. Bureaucracy reflects the fact that a complicated society is trying to do very many things at the same time, and that different officials have different roles. For instance, if you build a city, you want to secure cultural and religious heritage, but at the same time you want to build new houses, and it might interfere. You want to, as we heard at the opening of the last session, to meet sustainable targets. You want to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, but on the same time you want to have growth, economic growth and industry to flourish. And what happens is that the different parts of government react to the different goals, and they are very hard to put together. So sometimes remember that bureaucracy is not just a sleepy person. It's actually what happens in a modern society. And if you want to interact with that, you need to introduce time frames and be more clear on that you see this problems, because they're open to everyone to see, and relate to that in your governing. Say, well, we know it's a balance, and this is how we would like to see it balanced. That's better information. The second one is tougher, and that is something we need to address globally, and that's corruption. And corruption is not just some sleepy process. Corruption is individuals out of greed or any other circumstances trying to make it better for themselves and not in the common interest of their government or their country. When you mention financial inclusion, this is very interesting. Sweden and the Nordics is very close to being cashless societies. And so, yes, it's financial inclusion, but that also makes it possible for authorities to actually follow all the money. And by following the money, you have one of the needed tools to fight corruption, because this is one of the problems. You are given money on the side. But it's also about nepotism. It's also about actually appointing people who do not have the means or the experience to make the job, but they kind of are friend with the one appointing them. That's also a major problem. How do you react to this? while I mentioned transparency, I mentioned the need to have a discussion on this, but also to have a thorough follow-up on all finances, on all payments, because when you get corruption into the system, you will get bad results. And as you saw with this horrible earthquake in Turkey and Syria, this is now the typical discussion. Is this corruption? Have they actually not built the houses to be able to stand against an earthquake, which we actually usually know better to do? But this is the effect of corruption. Someone has gained something in the past, and now you see the result. That's why we need to address this. And it goes to government, it goes to everything that we have in global processing. Thirdly, and that's actually pointing the finger to the government itself. We very often say, this is what we would like to see, but we do not always answer to the question, how? Sometimes we actually introduce the wrong tools. The legislation is bad. The measures that we introduce do not work. Yes, we are clear on what we want, but we actually lack the knowledge or the suggestions to make it happen. So sometimes we also need to criticize ourselves. And it's not just by budget. It's not only spending money. It's very often how to get there. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's a learning process. And I think as a government, especially me, I was served 8 years as Prime Minister, this became more and more a question. It's not only what we want. We need to discuss what kind of efficient tools we have to get the job done.
Thank you. I would like to follow up, given that you served in a very senior leadership position. How do you know when you have enough data? I think the temptation is that always we could gather more data now or later. When you, as an executive leader, know that you are comfortable in knowing that you have an adequate amount of data to make the correct decision?
And the honest answer is that you never have enough information, because nowadays, I'm out of office since a couple of years, but journalists in my country still ask, given what we know after you left, what kind of decision would you have made now? And I say, that's a ridiculous question, because I didn't know what we now know. I made the decision on the information at hand. That's all the decision we take. The information at hand at the time we took the decision. And did I felt any time that I 100% perfect information? No. That's leadership. You make decisions, you do not have the perfect information, but you should make sure you have the best information that you could oversee. And that you also, as I said, follow it up through auditing or other measures, because it's probably not perfect. And I also learned that the decision is one thing. I never saw any reform that I was taking inside my government that came out as perfectly as we had wanted it to be. So that's also part of the follow-up, because we are talking about people. People changes things, there are bureaucracy, there are even corruption. So it doesn't come out as you have envisaged it, and you have also responsibility then to correct it. So don't wait for the perfect information. But with transparency, in our day and time, we have better information than ever before. So that's good.
Thank you very much for that response. All three of our government leaders have talked about how important it is to digitize government. We heard about how many countries are moving now to cashless societies. So a question for Mr. Garodia is, how can the use of these electronic payments help elevate the role of government?
Yeah. Maybe I'll talk about the data part first.
Sure.
Because that's the topic. So I'm going to talk about, firstly, I can confirm I've been traveling to Sweden for the last 20 years. I haven't seen how a Swedish kroner looks like.
No.
Because it's always been such a digital society. And so we always look up to Sweden for that matter, especially in our industry. Coming to the use of payments data, I talked about how digital payments carry some rich data, which can be very useful for governments. I'll talk about two use cases, actually. One is on developing tourism, and that's where Devika and Seychelles are one of our partners where we work with them. So think about, in this case, tourists coming to a country, and when they spend, the digital payments can tell you where did the people come from, what did they do when they were in the country. And that can lead to some very interesting insights in how country can build tourism programs and tourism. So you can identify, for example, which parts of the world you get tourists from. You can also understand how does it index to another country which has a tourism program which you look up to. Even within a particular source of tourists, like US, do you get more tourists from New York or do you get more tourists from California? Should you spend your marketing dollars marketing to a state X or a state Y? What do the tourists do when they come to a country? What are the kind of things do they spend on? So can you optimize your tourism product better to cater to the needs and maximize your tourism revenue? While we were walking in, Devika mentioned one of the objectives for a country like Seychelles, which gets 4 times the tourists as the local population. They want the yield to be higher versus getting much more tourists because they want to contain that. So these kind of insights can really help in countries' design. And we work with about 40, 50 countries with that. So that data is extremely valuable. We're very proud of in how countries are using it to build better tourism programs. The second area, which is a bit more new to us, but we have just started working on it, and one of our early partners is Office of National Statistics in UK, where they are using our data for some very interesting use cases. So again, think about data in this case as how are people spending at which time of the day and where. So mobility, spend, and so they started using our data to develop some very rich insights that are used by different ministries and highest level of government on understanding quick impact of certain policies. So they did a big analysis when the inflation came in and the fuel prices went up. They could understand how the consumption of fuel is changing as the fuel prices went up and down across the fuel stations. And there was a correlation to prices, and when the prices came, the consumption came back. But it was very important for government to understand actually what was happening in the real economy, which they could do real time because we have very rich data there. The second area they kind of worked on, and UK, like many other countries, has this stated government objective of leveling up agenda. So how do you grow the north as well as London, for example? So to understand how the different regions of a country are doing is a very important requirement. And some of this data can help governments understand how is the spend performing in different parts of, based on their actions. Is it moving, not moving? And there are a lot of then little insights into inter-regional spending. I talked about cross-border in the Seychelles case. In this case, how do people move across the country and where do they, so domestic tourism, for example. So those kind of insights are very powerful. High streets, how are the high streets doing? That's a big question for UK government. So they're using some of our data to understand that. And in the next phase of work, they have, I met them before I came in, and they we would like the data to understand the night economy, for example, which is possible. We just didn't think of that as a possible area where governments can use data. The coastal economy, I didn't even think there was a need for that. So that's been very fascinating. So, and we're working with one big statistics agency as a partner to see what kind of good user data can be put to, and we're finding some very, very rich insights from that. So those are the kind of 2 case studies which bring to life a bit more about how digital payments can not only drive inclusion, but also generate data which can be used for even better good in driving better policies and decisions.
Those were excellent, excellent examples of data analysis. Back to our distinguished guest from Malta. Space has long captured the imagination of citizens, officials, and entrepreneurs. I'm aware that Malta is developing plans to attract investment from the space sector. Could you please tell us a little bit more about your country's plans in this interesting area?
True. Space, for most of history, has been the sole domain of governments and state-aligned research organizations. Nowadays, we use the term new space, which signifies the investment by the private sectors. Whereas large economies, large countries continues to benefit from economies of scale, Small countries such as Malta can benefit from economic nimbleness. That's why we have formulated our space strategy, which is built on 5 pillars, once again, being development of human capital, foreign direct investment, valorization of space data, and having a bespoke regulatory environment. Besides that, we are also seeking to upscale the labor market by investing more in our students in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Okay, that plan certainly sounds very interesting to me and probably to others in our audience today. What are some of your other plans to attract businesses to Malta? Why would an innovator or an entrepreneur be interested in investing in Malta today?
Well, basically, we have the geographical position, which is in Southern Europe, between North Africa. It can serve as a gateway to North Africa and to Europe. We have a favorable tax regime as well. And being a small country, we say small is beautiful. The government is close. The government is close to the people, and we are practically a country which is open for business.
And I have visited Malta prior to the pandemic, and I would agree, it's certainly a country I would like to spend more time in. To our next panelist, same question. What are the plans that you are working on with your senior leadership team to encourage investment, innovation, entrepreneurship in Seychelles?
Well, the economy of Seychelles has largely been dependent on the tourism sector, and this has been the pillar of our economy for a number of years. And by virtue of that, the economy has not been well diversified. And at the moment, the government has embarked on an economic diversification agenda. So we are in the process of looking for opportunities to grow other sectors. Therefore, the opportunities are, at this point in time, very encouraging, and I would not say limitless, but there is a lot of opportunities to be explored. We're always open for business, as is Malta, but given the size of our economy and of our country, we are definitely constrained in terms of the resources that we have. So whenever we are looking to grow a particular sector of the economy, we have to be cognizant of the limitations that comes with the limitation of resources that we have. So it's all a balancing act. So for us right now is to identify the sectors where the country can diversify into, but at the same time ensuring that we maintain the islands that we have in the pristine status that it is in currently. And I would definitely encourage you to come and visit Seychelles for you to see for yourselves. I will not do it justice by just explaining. It's better you come and you experience, and I'm sure you're going to come and visit for me more than once, I'm convinced. So, but that's primarily it. We are looking at the potential sectors. We are working as well in terms of communicating opportunity areas to the global community. We will be launching an investor map in a couple of weeks, and this will provide a series of investment opportunity areas that foreigners can come in and invest in, and as well as encourage local investment. Again, because we have the local investment has primarily focused in the tourism industry. So there's a lot of good things to come.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Reinfeldt, we've heard now about how countries are leveraging their data to make decisions, to increase research, to increase innovation, to help develop young people in the STEM fields, to explore space, to expand tourism. What's on the horizon for Sweden?
Well, first of all, I think all the members of this panel, together with Dubai, has one thing in common. We are the world in between of China and United States. And of course, the main question is, if they are kind of polarizing the world, where will the rest of us be? And I think that's a valid question in Sweden, but that's also a valid question in the rest of the countries. Especially now, as you know, inside European Union, there's a lot of discussion on the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden package, which is actually giving a lot of resources to companies to move from Europe or other parts of the world into the United States. And that's one of the questions. Is that the way to do it? And I would say no. What we need to do is actually to understand that how we deal with all these matters that we have been discussing, that is what is creating attractiveness. Because we have never seen so much money in the world as we have now. And that's linked to the fact that we have a global growing middle class. Yes, the pandemic put us back a bit, but it's still growing. And we have aging populations in many parts of the world, which creates enormous resources linked to pension funds. So alongside that, a lot of private investment capital. You've never seen so much money. And they want to invest because they want a return on investment. So if you can do exactly what we have been discussing here, controlling your information, fighting corruption, making the good example as an open society, because that is what investing is about, attracting people to come and see and understand something where they do not have their daily life. And I understand this is a challenge sitting next to Seychelles and Malta and saying that you should go to Sweden and look at snow. but that is not only, of course, a tourist thing. It's also to get investments. And exactly as said here, technology, being in the forefront of education, on space, on everything that has been mentioned, that is how you do this. And this is at the core of government, to understand this and create the atmosphere and the school system to make it happen. And we need to do it because I do not agree with those who say that you have to choose to be in a world dominated either by US or China. No, we should be free, more open, more independent, and we should make our efforts to make that happen.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Gorodia, how can the private and public sectors work together to help the governments realize their plans?
Yeah. Firstly, I think good to have 3 choices for summer holidays between Malta, Seychelles, and Sweden. They all sound great. I think I'll come back to digital payments as a very important way, at least where companies like us can partner with public sector in driving growth. And we think there are 5 opportunities. 2 is in how governments spend money. So 1 is on social payments. How do you digitize those and make it more efficient and work better for people who receive them? 2 is how procurement is made. I think that needs to be way more digital. And also include small businesses more and more in that procurement process. The other area is how governments collect revenue, and offering a good digital experience can transform how citizens trust the governments and how they interact with it. And then 2 other strategic areas. 1 is small businesses. Small businesses have to digitize and they need government help. And digital payments are a big part of how those businesses will fit for competition. And the last one is using data for better policy making. I think that's where having digital payments creates the infrastructure to do things like that and be more effective. So that would be my 5 things you can do.
Well, thank you very much. That concludes the formal questions for our panelists today. Panelists, do any of you have closing words for our audience?
Right. My colleagues have mentioned digitalization and how obviously it does really help in terms of collecting data. And I'd have to say that we're actually living that currently in the Seychelles. We have equally embarked on a, I would have to say, rigorous program to digitalize a lot of our services. And on top of that, we're also using this as a platform to obtain feedback from our customers, so from the clients that we serve. Because not only do we want the processes to be efficient, but we want them to serve and to be to reach that level of expectation that the public demands. So it's achieving both of these objectives. And as a government, it's important that you're able to implement and take decisions which shows that you are meeting the needs of the people. And I think this forms the basis of a very successful government. It's how you respond and you react to the needs of your people. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
I agree.
Okay, well, thank you very much for a very stimulating discussion.